I'm going to be introducing material here that none of you have seen. In fact, we just got it this morning. So it's hot off the press. We have our team in London that's working on this, and it's exciting because I think we can now destroy the Quran. And so I'm going to demand that if the Muslims are going to make a claim that the Quran was compiled completely at the time of Uthman and that it has not changed since then I'm going to demand one Quran, one manuscript of the Quran from 652 that's complete. That means 114 surahs that is exactly like this book that I have in my hand today. And can be dated to the mid-7th century. Is that too much to ask? One iota since its inception, 1400 years ago, that the Quran we have today is exactly the same as that which is on the preserved tablets in heaven, that our Quran, it parallels in every detail that which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad and was written down completely by Uthman in 652. But is that what the earliest Muslim scholars believed? No, there's a disconnect.
Welcome to Events and History, where we explore the origins, teachings, and historical development of Islam with a fact-based, analytical approach.
In this incredible lecture, Dr. J. Smith unveiled groundbreaking discoveries that are redefining how scholars understand Islam's most sacred text today. With new manuscript evidence, linguistic analysis, and archaeological findings, Smith demonstrates that the Quran we have today is not the pristine, unchanged revelation Muslims claim it to be. From early Quranic fragments showing textual variations to the late development of Arabic script itself, he exposes a history of editing, redaction, and political influence. The lecture dismantles the myth of a perfectly preserved Quran, revealing a complex evolution shaped by human hands and imperial agendas. Backed by academic research and visual evidence, Dr. Smith challenges both traditional Islamic claims and Western assumptions about the Quran's authenticity. This is not just a critique, it's a scholarly investigation into the very origins of the Islamic scripture and the faith built upon it. Let's watch the video.
Now, remember, there are four things that all Muslims claim, and this is why it's important that we get into this, engage on this. First and foremost, they would always, you get this polemic by Muslims against us saying that we have corrupted our Bible. You've heard that, right? And they say we don't have the originals. They believe they do have the originals, and they believe that this book here, that I have in my hand here, is uncreated. That's the first claim they make. This book was created, was not created. It has always existed, and that's because the Quran itself makes that claim in chapter 85, verse 22. Secondly, they believe this book was sent down to a man named Muhammad between 610 and 632. So that 22-year period, this book was sent down piecemeal over that 22 period via the angel Gabriel from that eternal tablet that exists in heaven. Number three, that it was not completed during his lifetime. It was not completed for another 20 years when he died. When Uthman was caliph, so 20 years after he died. And number four, that this book I have in my hand today is unchanged. So this is the exact same book that was created by Uthman in 652 that exists in heaven on those eternal tablets. Those are the four claims they make. I've been saying this, and I've been using these four since 2014, but you can ask any Muslim if that's true. And every Muslim will have to agree to those four claims, except maybe the liberals. But the liberals only make up 1%, so they're not really important to our discussion. Now, do we make that claim about the Bible? Please don't. We would not say our Bible is uncreated. We know it was created. We know who wrote it. We know the names of the authors who did write it, and we would put their names on the books of many of the books they wrote. The Bible was not sent down because it was written on earth. It was written by men on earth, about 33 different authors in their own languages. The Bible was complete. That's one claim that we would make. It was complete. The original autographs were complete. But number four, it has been changed, and we know where it's been changed. And so we do stipulate, and we put in our Bible a line right there in Mark chapter 16, verse 9 to 20. We put a line warning the readers that these next verses are not found in the earliest Greek manuscripts. We would say the same thing about John chapter 7, John chapter 7, verse 53 to John 8, verse 11, and 1 John chapter 5, verse 7. Those verses, we warn the readers that they are not in the earliest Greek manuscript. So we would not make these four claims except for number three. But we don't have the original autographs. Now, my remit today, I am not going to confront the first two. how can I confront eternality and how can I confront what happened in the 7th century? What I'm going to confront are the last two, and that's all that we are asked to confront. And so I'm going to demand that if the Muslims are going to make a claim that the Quran was compiled completely at the time of Uthman and that it has not changed since then I'm going to demand one Quran, one manuscript of the Quran from 652 that's complete. That means 114 surahs that is exactly like this book that I have in my hand today. And can be dated to the mid-7th century. Is that too much to ask? Now, more than that, they're going to make that claim and you're going to see why I'm confronting that. I'm going to do 10 different areas today. I have only 40 minutes to do that. Is that all I'm given, 40 minutes? He's gone out the room. Good, I can do as long as I want. We're going to look at 10 different areas. What is that you just showed me? Just put that away. You can't do it in 30 minutes. I'm sorry. You can't do it in 30 minutes because there's some rich stuff that you need to see. Let's go through the areas. The first area, what do modern Muslim leaders claim? Let's see what they claim. Well, there's Susan Hanif. She said it's preserved today in an exact original form. She's a convert to Islam. Maybe she doesn't know any better. Well, let's look at Fethullah Gulen. One Quran, unaltered, unedited, and untampered. He is leader of the Gulen party. He now lives in Pennsylvania. This is the man that Erdogan is trying to get back to Turkey. So he should know a little bit better. Abdul Yusuf Ali should certainly know what he's talking about because he actually translated the Quran, into English back in the 1930s from Pakistan, considered to be the most authoritative translation. He says not a single letter has changed. Are you seeing that? Not a single letter. That means not a single of the razm. That means the consonantal text. Maulvi Muhammad Ali, he is the leader of the Ahmadiyya party, and he says not even a diacritical point has changed. Not even a dot has changed, the ones that are above and below line. Look at the claims they're making. Dr. Shabat Ali, a good friend of mine, I've debated him maybe six times now. He says it is exactly identical for the last 1,300 years. So the Quran we have in our hand today is exactly identical for the last 1,300 years. Then he goes on to talk about the specific ones. He's talking about the Tashkent, the Samarkand manuscript in Tashkent. He calls it Russia. It's not Russia. He made a mistake there. Nonetheless, he did say that for 1,400 years, it's the exact same manuscript. That's the Samarkand. He's talking about the Ma'il, and he's talking about the Topkapi. So he's talking about 3 manuscripts that are exactly the same that we have in our hand today. So their conclusion is that the Quran we have today has not changed over one iota since its inception 1,400 years ago, that the Quran we have today is exactly the same as that which is on the preserved tablets in heaven, that our Quran, it parallels in every detail that which was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad and was written down completely by Uthman in 652. But is that what the earliest Muslim scholars believed? No, there's a disconnect. Let's look at what they used to say. Now, let's look at what the scholars from the 8th, 9th, and 10th century, actually 9th, 10th, and 11th century, because the earliest scholars, the ones that we do have, they did not say what the scholars today are saying. Here's Ibn Abi Dawud, who says that some of the verses were lost. Here's an example of As-Suyuti, who says some of the verses have disappeared. Let none of you say, I have acquired the whole of the Quran. How does he know what it is, all of it is, when much of the Quran has disappeared? Now that's quite a mouthful. That's not what the scholars are saying today. Here you have Sahih Muslim. Sahih Muslim is only second to Al-Bukhari in importance, and he says some of the verses were forgotten. Bukhari is considered to be the most authoritative of the compilers of the Hadith. He said, we used to read a verse of the Quran revealed in the connection, but later the verse was canceled. So he was very clear that parts of the Quran had been canceled. Here is Sahih Bukhari talking about the verse on the Rajam. That's the verse on stoning. And he says, stoning of married persons, male and female, who committed adultery, and we did recite the verse and understood it and memorized it. Allah's apostle did carry out the punishment of stoning, and so did we after him. I am afraid that after a long time has passed, somebody will say, by Allah, we do not find the verse of Rajam in Allah's book. And thus they will go astray by leaving an obligation which Allah has revealed. So here you have bemoaning the fact that the prophet stoned, we stoned. What are they going to do when they look at the Quran and the verse on stoning has now been changed to 100 lashes? That's chapter 24, verse 2. Some verses were overlooked, according to Ibn Abi Dawud. Some verses were changed, according to Muwatta Ibn Malik. Some verses were modified, according to Ibn Abi Dawud again. And some verses were substituted. Sahih Bukhari talks about that. And some verses were even eaten by sheep. The verse of stoning and of breastfeeding an adult 10 times was revealed, and the paper was with me. This is Aisha referring to that. Under my pillow, when the messenger of Allah died, we were preoccupied with his death, and a tame sheep came in and ate it. I have a feeling she probably gave it to the sheep. So, lost, disappeared, forgotten, canceled, missing, overlooked, changed, modified, substituted, eaten by sheep. Does this sound like a book which was compiled perfectly and completely like the modern scholars are saying? Does this not imply intentional human interference or intervention right through its initial compilation? So now let's look, and let's don't go to the historical one. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to go right to the compilation. Let's look and see how the Quran was put together. And to do that, you need to go to Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509 and 510. Because of lack of time, I'm just going to summarize what he says there. In 509, he talks about the first recension, which is the first compilation that was done under Abu Bakr between 632 and 634. Muhammad has already died. The Quran has not yet been written down. So Abu Bakr and Umar are there, and they are reminiscing about the fact that there is a problem here because many of those who had memorized it had died in the Battle of Yamama. What are they going to do? If all of them died, they're not going to have any Quran. So they get Zayd ibn Thabit, who is the secretary of Muhammad, to come, and they ask him to write the Quran down. He says, how can I do something the Prophet has not done? They said, nonetheless, it's a good thing to do it. So he said, okay. So he goes to bones and stones and pieces of bark in people's memory, and he compiles the first Quran. That's the first recension. That is given to Hafsa, one of the wives of Muhammad, and she puts it under her bed and leaves it there for 20 years. Then we get to chapter 6, verse 510. Now we're 20 years later. We're not in 632 anymore. We're now in 652. Uthman is now in power. Uthman realizes that there are many different Qurans at this time, so he's warned about this. Let's not do what the Christians do, with many they're going to be accused of that. Therefore, let's rewrite the Quran in one codified form. So he gets Zayd ibn Thabit again. He's the secretary of Muhammad, along with 3 others, Alas, Zubair, and Hisham. And the 4 of them were given the responsibility to write the Quran a second time. Are you listening to this? A second time. And he says, if you have any discussion, if you have any disagreement, write it in the Qurayshi dialect. Now, who are my Arab speakers right here? Okay, sir, what's wrong with that right there? In order to know an Arabic dialectical difference, what do you need in the consonantal text? You need the dots, and you need what else? The vowels. You need the dhamma, the kasra, and the fatha, right? You need the u, the e, and the ah sound. Those are 3 vowels. You have to have that in order to see a different dialect. If it's a Qurayshi dialect, the only way I can read, not here, but the way I can read a Qurayshi dialect is if it's written with the dhamma, kasra, and fatha. Were there any dhammas, kasra, and fathas in the 7th century? Absolutely not. They had yet to be invented. So this makes no sense. But then look who's writing this. Sahih Bukhari is writing this in 870. That's the late 9th century when there was dhamma, kasra, and fathas. There was vowelization. This is written 200 years later, redacting it back to the 7th century. Can you see then why modern Arabs do not understand this? So when they talk about different readings of the Quran, when they talk about ahruf and qira'at, which you hear all the time, that's what they're talking about. They say, listen, there are different readings. This is a problem. This is why Muhammad said there were 7 different readings. How can you have 7 different readings when there's nothing to show you in the consonantal text that there's a different reading? That you can only do in the 8th and 9th century, not in the 7th century. Are you following this? The Arabs, you're following what I'm saying. The rest of you, don't worry about it. This is what the Arabs need to argue, and you need to shut this argument down, because this is coming out of the Indian subcontinent who don't speak Arabic. That's why they don't understand the problem with this. And most Arabs even don't understand this problem because they don't know the history of the Arabic text. Let's move on. So then he says to Zayd ibn Thabit, write that down, and then what does he do? He takes that one final copy, and he sends it out to every province. We're going to see how many provinces that means. And then he takes all the remaining manuscripts and he burns them. Why do you burn manuscripts? And of course, unless they disagree. But what and where are the disagreements? These disagreements have nothing to do with diacritical marks. These disagreements have nothing to do with vowelization, because those have yet to be invented. So that means they have to be disagreeing in the razm, the consonantal text. You see him nodding his head. You agree with me on that. Arabs get this. No one else gets it, because it's their language. God bless you that we have Arab Christians that can confront this for them. Now, here's my first question. First and foremost, why in God's wisdom, after he had already had Hebrew and Greek to use, why in the world Does he go and choose a third language to reveal his best revelation, and a language which could not even accommodate his scripture? Because there was no diacritical marks in the 7th century. There was no vowelization. Why did he use Arabic? That doesn't show a very smart God, very inept God. Secondly, why did he use his greatest revelation? Why did he reveal it to a man who couldn't read and write? Thirdly, it doesn't take much time to read and write Arabic. There are only 28 letters in the Arabic alphabet. I learned it in 2 weeks. I didn't know how to speak it, but Muhammad knew how to speak it. He had 22 years to read it, 22 years to learn it. Why didn't he learn it in 22 years? Thirdly, he had a secretary, Zayd ibn Thabit. What do secretaries do? They write. So why didn't he write it down while he was being revealed? And then, fourthly, what about Abu Bakr? Why didn't Abu Bakr make copies immediately? Why did he leave one copy? Why did he give it to Hafsa? Why did she stick it under her bed for 20 years? What good does it do under someone's bed? And does that not suggest, therefore, it was not that important? Now let's move on. Continue on. How many people? They say, well, that's because hundreds and thousands of people died at the Battle of Yamama. We know of only 70 that are listed that died at the Battle of Yamama. How is it that the entire Quran is dependent on 70 minds? Which suggests to me, obviously, you've got a problem here if that's all that knew the Quran. Doesn't this prove that there was very few who actually knew the Quran? Doesn't this also prove that there was a real crisis with the Quran? And also, doesn't this moreover prove that the memorization wasn't good enough? Muslims say we don't need the manuscripts, they have it all memorized. And evidently, they didn't have enough of it memorized if 70 was starting and creating a crisis about the time of Abu Bakr. You need a lot more than 70 to memorize it to make sure that it's codified. Concerning Bukhari 5:10, how could there be dialectical differences? I already talked about it. And why did they then have to burn that which didn't agree? Now let's look at what they did. They took that one copy and they sent it Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Aden, Herat, and Nishapur. 9 different cities. We know of 9 cities that they sent this manuscripts to. That means 9 cities should have that manuscript today, because we're only talking about 1,400 years ago. Show me one from any of those 9 cities. We can't even find one. Now take a look at those 9 cities. Look at the names. Every one of them except for Jerusalem are still within Muslim hands today, are they not? And for 1,400 years, they've been under Islamic control. Are you telling me that somewhere along the line there was some type of flood, or there was some type of warfare, or there's some type of fire, or anything that would have destroyed those 9 manuscripts? I don't recall that at all being in the history of the last 1,400 years. So where are those 9 manuscripts? That's what I want to know. Because 9 were made immediately and sent to 9 provinces. The fact that Zayd ibn Thabit came upon Surah 33, Ayah 23, with only one man, this fellow's name, proves the Quran was not even complete in 632. He had to then add another surah according to volume 6, chapter 6, verse 510. Now let's look at the manuscripts we do have. These are the major manuscripts. These are the 6 that I introduced back in 2014 with my debate with Shabir Ali. And still today, these are the major manuscripts because they're the most complete. There are many fragments, but not the ones as complete as this. That's the Topkapi on the left, which is in Topkapi Museum in Istanbul. That's the Samarkand in Tashkent that Shabir Ali thinks is in Russia. This is the Ma'il manuscript, which is in London at the Bibliothèque Nationale, the National Library, and the one on the right is the Petropolis, which is at the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris, in Paris. There's the Al-Huzayni, which is in Cairo in Egypt, and the Sana manuscript in Yemen. Let me just go back real quickly and show you what's the problem with every one of them. The Topkapi manuscript is probably the most complete of all the manuscript. It has 99% of the Quran, but only around 87 of it can be read because it's been so damaged. They don't keep their Qurans very well. What's interesting about it, it is written in a much later script. You can see it's a Kufic, and it's also written in a stylized script. It has 2,270 manuscript variants. That means words and phrases in that text that do not agree with my Quran that I have here. Now remember, we're not talking about ahruf, we're not talking about qira'at. These are razm changes. These are consonantal differences. 2,270 just within that text. The one on the right is the Samarkand. It only goes up to chapter 43, but within those 43 chapters, only 1 chapter is complete. 16 don't even exist. What's more, much of the material in there is so full of grammatical mistakes It has so many incoherent references that both Dr. Tamam Azimi, not Tamam Azimi, Dr. Ekmel Nisanalu, the two scholars who have looked at it from Turkey, they both have said that it's really an embarrassment because whoever wrote it did not know Arabic very well. What's written by 5 different hands, all of which were very inept. The Ma'il manuscript goes up to Surah 53. It is one of the better ones. It is called the Ma'il because it's a slanting text. Within it, we have found hundreds of manuscript variants. The Petropolitanus only has 25% of the Quran. Most of the Quran is missing. Within just 25% of the Quran, we found 93 manuscript variants. That means changes that are different from the Quran we have today. The Husayni is one of the better texts, but if you look at it, you'll see it's a monumental text written in a much more monumental style. It has been dated to the 9th century, not to the 7th century. The most exciting one is the Sanaa manuscript on the right. That was just discovered in 1975. 4 German scholars, Dr. Gerd Puyn, Dr. Oleg, Dr. von Bothmer, and well, never mind. That's not his name. I just can't remember his name. They were flown down in 1981 to look at it, and they immediately took pictures of it. That's one of their pictures from Gerd Puyn's manuscript. Take a look right there on the right page where I'm flashing. And you notice there's a yellow mark right there? That yellow mark is a verse declension. Above it is chapter 19. Below it is chapter 22. What happened to chapter 20 and 21? Well, to see where it happened, you need to look over here. There's chapter 20, begins on the other side, in a completely different script. There's about 60 years between those two scripts, those 2 pages. Now, every time you see an orange mark, that is a manuscript variant. There's over 1,000 of these manuscript variants just within that manuscript that don't agree with the Quran I have in my hand today, the Hafs text that I have here. Now let's look at the summary. Every one of these manuscripts are written in the 8th or 9th century. Not one of them is from the 7th century. Not one of them is complete. Not one of them agrees with each other. And not one of them agrees complete with the Quran I have in my hand today. So you cannot use these manuscripts to support the notion that the Quran has been eternal and that it has been complete and that it has been unchanged. When you want to look at the Sanaa manuscript, you will notice that it has an underlayer. When they looked at the underlayer, they unpacked it, and the book that's just come out in 2017 that described it by Asma Hilali found that there were 63 verses in that underlayer. When you look at the underlayer, you will notice that it does not agree with the upper layer, and that doesn't even agree with the Quran that we have in our hand today. Of the 63 verses that exist, there are 70 manuscript variants, proving that it's a completely different Quran. Yet it's the earliest that we've ever found. This is the only part of any Quran that actually exists from the 7th century that we can accurately date. When you get to the carbon datings, and this is what Muslims are now claiming, they're claiming that the carbon datings prove that the Quran is very early. And they looked at the Birmingham folio that came in 2015 that had been carbon dated at the Oxford University Laboratory, and they dated it from 568 to 645. Muhammad was born in 570, died in 632. So it covers Muhammad's life. When they came out with this, they suggested, therefore, that this was the earliest Quran, that it existed at the same time Muhammad existed. The difficulty is many Arab scholars and many Muslim scholars did not agree with this, and that's why they kept their mouths shut for one very obvious reason. Even if you take the latest date, 645, that's 7 years before, Uthman created the second Quran, canonized the text. So how can you have a Quran that predates the canonized text? Ooh, I love that. If you want to take carbon dating, then you need to look at these carbon datings of the Sanaa manuscript that have just come out. These carbon datings were done in Lyon in France, in Kiel in Germany, in Zurich in Switzerland, and in Oxford in England. And just take a look at the Sanaa manuscript that they carbon dated and just look at the dates. There is the one in Lyon, there's the one in Kiel, there's the one in Zurich, and there's the one in Oxford. Take a look at the dates. They go from 390 to, what's the mark, 5? I can't read from this angle. 552. When was Muhammad born? 570. That means they predate Muhammad's life by over 100 years, in some cases 200 years, which means they predate Muhammad, they predate the Quran, they predate Islam, and they also predate, take a look at it, they also predate Uthmanic recension by over 100 years. So are you going to go without carbon dating? You cannot just pick and choose which one you want to go with. You have to go with all the carbon datings, proving that carbon dating is very inexact. Be careful of carbon dating. You need to go with the paleographic evidence. The paleographic evidence is very clear that all of these manuscripts are much later, especially the Sanaa manuscript. Now, let's look at the diacritical marks. Now take a look at those two manuscripts. Can you notice there's no dots in them? That's what Arabic looked like in the 7th century. No dots above them. There you have the Samarkand manuscript on the left, and you have the Sana on the right. Now, why is it that it's important to have the diacritical marks? Well, as I said, there are 28 letters. But the Aleph, the Lam, the Kaf, the Ha, and the Mim. One more. There you go. Wow. A little embarrassed. Those 6 do not need any dots. So of the 28, 22 letters need dots. The other 6 do not. That's why you have to have the diacritical marks. That's why they had to be invented. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a smiley face here. When you put 1 dot above it, it's a noon. When you put 2 dots, it's a ta. 3 dots, it's a tha. Now, when you put that same smiley face and put 1 dot below it, it's a ba. 2 dots, it's a ya. If you take all of them together, you have a na, ta, tha, ba, ya. 5 different letters from just 1 smiley face. Can you see the problem? If you have 3 smiley faces together, like most letters are, most words have 3, you always have 3 letters to a word in Arabic. That's the root word, am I correct? That's why you always take the first 3, the 3-worded letters is where you start your dictionaries. If you take just 3 letters, 3 smiley faces together, you can get 19 different words just depending on where you put the dots. Can you see the confusion in why you then had to have some type of qirat, some type of ahruf, some type of understanding what the text was saying? And that's why the variants existed. Now take a look at that picture right there. Those are 26 of 32 that Hatun Tash has now been able to collect around the Muslim world just by looking at going to marketplaces. When you look at those texts, those you can buy in the marketplace today. We've got all 32 of them. That's just the first 26 she was able to discover. Each one of them is different. Those are all in Arabic. None of them are translations. They come from these men right here that you see on the right, from 5 different cities, in Basra, Baghdad, in Mecca, Medina, and also Damascus. When you look at those 5 cities, you will notice that every one of those cities, which supposedly had Qurans in them, had teachers who then trained different students. When the diacritical marks were then being introduced in the 8th and 9th century, they had so many disagreements that you had many students come out with many of their different Qurans. Just by looking at just 23 of those Qurans, we're just still going through it, just by looking at 23 of those Qurans, we've already now noted 93,000 differences. 93,000 differences. Can you see then why Muslims are being duped when they say the Quran has never changed? Let me show you what happened when in 1924. That one I've just circled is known as the Hafs Quran. Only one was chosen. He is a student that came from Kufa. He died in 796. That's 144 years after Uthman. And yet that's the Quran that we have in our hand today. One man, he died 144 years after Muhammad, never knew Muhammad, never even come from Arabia. He came from Kufa, which is in Iraq. Why was his chosen and the others not? Because we now know that there should be 39 different Qurans. We've already found 32. We're going to get the other 7 yet. Just hold on, we'll get them. Because they're on sale in most of your bazaars in Morocco and also in Yemen and in Jordan. That's where we're getting them. What's fascinating is Muslims have never been told this. This is the lie that you're not hearing. And probably for many of you, this is the first time you've heard it. Now let's look at some of the examples. Most of the Muslims like to go to Surah 1, Ayah 4, the difference between Maliki and Maliki. Well, that's not much difference. That's not the biggest problem. Look at this one, chapter 3, verse 146. Qatala versus kutila. One is fought, the other is killed. Now, it's talking about a prophet. Do prophets fight or are they killed? Well, if I'm a prophet, I like to know that I'm just fighting and not being killed, thank you. So that has a huge difference depending on what the subject is on that one. Here's in chapter 43, verse 19. It's ibadu versus inda. One is slaves, and what's the other one? In the presence. Now, this is fascinating because are the angels that it's talking about slaves of Allah or simply in the presence of Allah? Or is it the slaves of those in Allah's presence who will be male or female? Well, if I were an angel, I would prefer being in God's presence than his slave. And if I were an angel, I would prefer if only the slaves were made females. I would not prefer the slaves be made females because I'm a male. This would have a huge amount of importance depending on who's reading this. Can you see how this changes the context? You could do a doctoral thesis just on that one variant there. Here's Isanan versus Harun. I think I'm reading. I can't read over there because it's Husan, sorry. And the difference in one is doing good and the other is beauty. Now, if I'm a parent and I have a child, I would like my child to be good rather than just beautiful as a parent. But it depends on which reading you're going to read. And that's why all of these have a huge import on how you read the Quran. I won't get into this one here because there's about 70s that I could get into. We don't have time to do that now. Get my bigger, the Quran PowerPoint, and you can get all the 70 that we looked at. We have we have 93,000 yet to get through. I've just shown you 3. But can you see how these damage the theology of the Quran and damage the authenticity of the Quran? Now we get into the earliest extant manuscripts. The critical edition of the Quran. When the Al-Azhar specialists convened to produce a reliable edition of the Quran towards 1920, they never thought of looking for the earliest written witnesses. Had they known how to identify them, but used in the course of their work the specialized literature on the Qira'at or the orthography, which developed in Muslim scholarly circles from 2nd, 8th, or 8th century. That's the problem. They had not do the right thing. If you're looking at a critical edition, you always go back to the earliest text. That's what we've done with the Bible. And you get the critical edition by looking at all the earliest texts and coming to some conclusion as to what that earliest text was. The Muslims never did that. Look and see what they did. But before we do that, the earliest complete Bible are the earliest Greek manuscripts that we have. And these are the Metropolitan Codices, the Codex Vaticanus, the Codex Sinaiticus, both from the 4th century, and the Codex Alexandrinus, which the Alexandrinus and Sinaiticus are in the British Library. Vaticanus is in Rome. Those are known as the 3 Metropolitan Codices. Those are 4th century and 5th century. That's 300 to 200 years before the Quran was even created. So how is it we can come up with 3 Metropolitan Codices of the entire New Testament 200 to 300 years before the Quran, and they can't come up with one from the 7th century? There's the question we need to ask. Is there a complete Quranic textual tradition back to Uthman? Mansour Ahmad was on the ladder in May 26. I could show you the video, but we don't have time, I know. When we were there at Speaker's Corner, I had not been to Speaker's Corner for 2 years, and I wanted to confront these new consonantal variants that we had. He got up on the ladder next to me. He is considered to be the world's authority on the manuscripts because he is in charge of the Islamic Awareness website, which is the largest website that contains all the earliest manuscripts. It's housed there in Cambridge University. And he got up on the ladder because there were 5 of the major players there at Speaker's Corner on May 26, just a few months ago. Muhammad Hijab, whom you know, David, was there. Ali Dawa, who has a following about 1 million that follow him. Mansour Ahmad, who is the authority on the manuscripts. He's the one that has always engaged with us on the manuscripts. And Adnan Rashid, who I've debated about 5 or 6 times. They were all there. They had all come to take me on, knew that I'd be at the corner that day, but they didn't know what I was going to do. And that's why it was great to have Mansour Ahmad get on the ladder with me. Mansour Ahmad got on the ladder. He was forced to get on by the others. They stood at the back and they pushed him up. He put his ladder up and he was going to take me on these consonantal variants, which I'm just going to introduce in just a bit. He made a claim while he was on the ladder. He said, these are nothing more than scribal errors. We're going to show you that none of these are scribal errors. And then he made this claim, Mr. Smith, we have a textual history that goes right to Uthman. Once he said that, and there were about 20 cameras on him, I immediately turned and I jumped on him because that's exactly what I wanted him to say. We wanted it on camera. So I said, okay, you have a textual history that goes all the way back to Uthman. I said, all right, I want right now for you to tell me, where is there one manuscript that's 114 surahs that parallels this book that I have in my hand today from 652? That's Uthman. He was quiet. If you look at the video, you'll see he's quiet. So then he says, well, from the 1st century Islam. I said, okay, let's just start. I first asked him, what about the 7th century? Do you have anything from the 7th century? I'm giving him a whole century. He said, you still didn't listen to me, Mr. Smith. He said, from the 1st century Islam. That means the 1st century AH. I said, listen, the 1st century Islam goes from 622 to 719. All right, let me ask you, do you have a complete Quran, 114 surahs, from the 1st century Islam that goes up to 719? Give me one. One complete Quran. That you made the claim. I want you to do it right now. He said, you're still not listening to me. He says, we have 96, actually he said 97, but he says we have 96% of the Quran by the 1st century Islam. That means by 719. That's the 8th century. I loved it. Let me show you what he meant. To understand what he meant, you need to go back to the Islamic Awareness website. You need to go up and you need to look at this graph. That's the graph that they're going by. That is what they're doing. What they're saying is that they can now find 96% of the Quran by 719, which means they cannot find 100%. Though they claim that they can find a textual history that goes all the way back to Uthman. That means 100%, right? That's the claim. So we've already cut them on that claim. But what do they mean by 96%? You need to go to the next page, and that's where they're getting it from. This is the graph that they're looking at. That's the graph that has all the manuscripts that they claim are from before 719. But take a look at them. There's 63 of them. Count them. But most of them are nothing more than fragments. They're nothing more than a verse here, a verse here. They've amalgamated, they've gone all over the world to find little bits of pieces of the Quran. Not one manuscript. In fact, the biggest one is the 2165, the very at the top of the list. That's the Muslim Quran that's in the British Library. That one is only 20% of the Quran. That's the biggest they've got. They have nothing that's bigger than 20% of the Quran. What's more, they claim that all of these categorically are from before 719. We have been doing research, and I just got this, just came in this morning. Look and see what we have now found. We've looked at every one of these manuscripts. Every one you're going to see here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I'm running out of time. 29 of them do not come from before 719. In fact, 9 of them come completely after 719. The other ones are nothing more than a tentative dates. There is no agreement from the scholars today. Which means, if you look at them, look at most of them are the largest ones that are up there. Half of what they're saying is errant, is basically they are fraudulent. Now that we've just found out as of this morning. We are now going to look at every one of these. We're going to go to the scholars themselves. We're going to ask every one of them what their conclusion is, and what we're going to find that most of these are probably 8th, 9th, and 10th century. So the question I asked them, I want one Quran that's complete. 114 surahs, that's by the 8th century. He could not answer. I want one Quran that's complete by the 9th century. He could not answer it. Then I said, look at all of those that you have up there. Every one of those 63 fragments, 29 of them you shouldn't have even put on that graph because they don't belong there, which if we haven't looked at it yet, but if you add that up, that only comes to about 31% of the Quran. But even in that 31% of the Quran, have you looked at any of them to see if they agree with the Quran we have today? They haven't looked at any of them. So how can they make this claim? Well, there is one man that has started to look at them, and his name is Dr. Dan Brubaker. Dr. Dan Brubaker is a good friend, and he is the first one to actually publish. He actually published this book. How many of you have been able to buy this book? Get it. Put it in your library. Read it. There, just hold it up there. There it is right there. Go ahead, Greg, George, if you can just show everybody. Take a look at his copy. This book is going to start the damage, because this is the first book that's ever been published. No Muslim has done this. This is an American who's not a Muslim who has done his doctoral thesis on this very thing, and he finally came out with his book on May 26, 2 hours before we got up on the ladder. He published this book, which means that we can now support it. We can now look at it. That's just 22 of 4,000 that he's found. Now, why are these so damaging? Everything you're going to see in this book has nothing to do with dots, has nothing to do with vowels, has nothing to do with what we call the dagar aleph. These are consonantal differences. These are razm texts. These are the original texts. He's found hundreds of insertions, erasures, coverings, tapings. There's some insertions you see there. There you can see some erasers. There you can see some erasers overwritten. Others overwriting without erasers. Selective coverings, probably the most damaging. Selective coverings overwritten, and then some tapings. Let's just look at what he has done. I'm not going to show you all 22. I'm just going to show you a smattering. Take a look at that one now. Huwa. Can you see the word huwa, where the green arrow is, has been added at a later date? Can you see it's a smaller set of letters? And yet it's been added at a later date. It has no vowelization. What's interesting is you don't need the huwa there. He is. You don't need it. It's understood. So why is huwa been added at a later date? The only reason it's been added is so that it now supports the Hafs text, this text that I have in my hand. Here you have an erasure in a Petropolis, lahum. It used to be laha. Now what's fascinating, lahum, for them, should be for him. And it's been made plural. But that still is not needed. You don't need the lahum there. So why have they erased it and written lahum after? So that it supports this 1924 Hafs text. Take a look at this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9 different instances where Allah has been added to the text. Did they forget God's name? 9 times they've forgotten God's name. In every one of those cases except for the yellow one at the bottom, all the ones circled in green, every one of those, the only reason you need Allah there, you do not need Allah there, it's understood by the context that it's talking about God. The only reason they have added Allah's name is so that it supports the 1924 Hafs text. Am I beginning to sound like a broken record? In every case, they have used it to standardize the text to the text we have today. Here you have an eraser from Surah 30, Ayah 9. Can you see it's an eraser? It's obvious they're not trying to hide it. There was a word there. It's no longer there. I have no idea what it used to be. Here is the cover of the book. There are 4 different changes there, corrections. In one case, you can see the Ilahi, which is up at the top, has been left in. It should not be there because that doesn't support the 1924 text. So Allah, which is out in the margin, has been added. It should be where the Ilahi is. They then rewrote the Ilahi in, and they put this out in the margin, showing that they're going to put it in at a later date. That now parallels the 1924 Hafs text. In every case, when you see these amalgamations, when you can see that here's an entire line between the lines that has been added, they're not trying to hide it. They're being very transparent about it. It was obvious that that was added at a later date. Here you can see where Al-Sama, which is the 7, has been added above the text. Here you can see Bimithli has been added in between. It's a much smaller text. Can you see it's with a smaller nib? And it has dots and it has also vowels. So there you can see it was added in the 9th or 10th century when they were then invented. And here you can see Allah has been added on the outside. This is from the Topkapi manuscript. Here's an eraser overwritten in the word bounty, and that is written, you can see where the text, they haven't even tried to hide that which they've erased. Here you have lahum. It used to be laha, or I'm sorry, that's cool. It used to be kal. Now it used to be kala, now it's been changed to kalu. He said has been changed to they said in 2 different manuscripts at the same place on Surah 34, Ayah 35. Why have they changed it from singular to plural? Because it now supports the 1924 Hafs text. Then I want to show you ones that are leaving gaps. Here's erasers overwritten nearly to a full line. Now take a look at this page here. 8 different coverings, 8 different corrections on one page. Can you see, when you read what's left behind, that now supports the 1924 Hafs text. But it's so ulta-pulta, it's hard to read. And here you can really see where the coverings on 3 different places, in every case, they are supporting the 1924 Hafs text. Now, have I said Hafs text for you enough times? What am I talking about? Who knows what the 1924 Hafs text is? Anybody? 1 or 2 of you? Well, I've given you the date, 1924. So what is this 1924 Hafs text? In the city of Cairo, only in one city, the Department of Education in the city of Cairo noticed that whenever they had standardized testing for the students there, every one of their answers was different because they were using many of the different Qur'ans. They were using the Warsh, they're using the Al-Duri. In fact, there's 2 Al-Duris. There's 7 different Hafs texts. And because of the fact that they could not have standardized tests, they went into Muhammad ibn Ali al-Huzaini al-Haddad. Remember that name? This is the man that was given the responsibility to choose the final Qur'an. He then went back to these 39 and he chose that one. He is the one that's responsible for choosing the Hafs text, but only for the schools in Cairo, nowhere else. So when you hear the 1924, all we're talking about is one city. He then took all the remaining texts, all the remaining manuscripts, he took them out into a boat and threw them into the Nile, which means they're still there today. Anything that disagreed, he threw into the Nile. Now, in 1936, the Egyptian government realized what a successful model it was for the city of Cairo, and they decided, therefore, to make it for Egypt-wide. And they call it the Farouki edition, named after King Farouk, who took power in 1936. In 1985, King Fahd in Saudi Arabia saw how successful it was for Egypt, decided to make this text, the Hafs text, universal for the whole world. That's 1985. How many people in this room are older than 1985? Every one of you is holding up your hand is older than the Quran. This Quran is only 34 years old worldwide. Now, put your thinking caps on. Every one of these consonantal variants, these corrections that I've shown you, have you noticed? Dr. Dan Brubaker has found 4,000 of them. every one of them that we're finding are now standardizing the text to this text. How do you standardize a text unless there's a standard that is understood? And when was the standard created? I leave that with you. God bless you. Can you see now what we're now doing? Let me just summarize this before you come up. What modern Muslim scholars claim is not what early Muslim scholars believed. The two compilations prove that men changed the Quran in its earliest period. The 6 manuscripts prove that men created 6 different Qurans between the 7th to 9th century. The 2 layers of the Salaf manuscript prove that men created a nascent Quran in the 7th century, washed it, and then rewrote over top of it. The 4 carbon dated lab reports prove that men borrowed stories created by before the Quran. Let me go back here. The 32 different Arabic Qurans prove that men even today still read a variety of Qurans. The 63 fragments employed to find just 96% of the Quran proves that they still don't have the original, while 29 of them are either tentative or have no sources. The 4,000 consonantal variants prove that they are possibly still changing and standardizing the text even today. And the 36 non-Hafs Qira'at variants that they did not use, which were dumped into the Nile, prove that when Muslims find problems with the Quran, they either burn them, or wash them, or erase them, or cover them, or sink them to destroy the evidence. Finally, from what we have researched and found, what we can say is the Quran was not created by God at all. The Quran was not sent down to Muhammad. The Quran was not completed by Uthman. The Quran was changed in the last 1,300 years. And the Quran was finally compiled in 1924 and made official in 1985. Thus, the Quran is a mere 34 years old. Consequently, many of us in this room are actually older than the Quran. Now, for those of you who want to know more about this, we are doing, and here's if you want to get a brochure, you can get it down there. If you want to sign up also for the Fander course, this is the Veritas. These are the lectures I'll be doing next month here at Costa Mesa. And there's the information you can get. The Fander course, I'll just say one real quickly. We're putting the Fander course on. I've just asked them to extend the period for registration for 1 week so that any of you who want to take the Fander course can apply for it. But you need to sign up on my sign-up sheet over here before today. This is the last day that they have open for registration because it starts next Tuesday. That comes to your laptop. You can be anywhere in the world. It's 24 courses. It starts next Tuesday and it goes till next April. It's a 2-hour lecture per 24 lectures. You don't have to be live to watch it. You can pull it down at your own leisure. God bless you. Can you see how that everything I've said, but before I end, I just want to end on one note. Have you noticed everything I've said is not a Christian polemic? Remember what Eddie says, that we're to confront and use polemics? Everything I've said this afternoon has nothing to do with Christianity. This is as neutral as you can get. This is a historical polemic. The claims they make about their Bible, however, we would never make about their Quran, however, we would never make about the Bible. But let me just say one last thing. This is not the only Word of God we have, right? Do we have another Word of God who took on flesh and dwelt among us? The Logos, is he also not called the Word of God? Well, let's see if these 4 things work for him. Jesus, is he eternal? Was he sent down? Is he complete? Has he never changed? Woo! The 4 things the Muslims are looking for in this book, we've got in Jesus Christ. So everything they want, we've got. Folks, bring them home. Bring them home. God bless you.
As this lecture draws to a close, Dr. J. Smith leaves his audience confronting an inescapable reality. The Quran's history is far more human than divine. The evidence, from early manuscripts with variant readings to the late standardization of Arabic, points not to miraculous preservation, but to centuries of evolution, correction, and control. Smith's research dismantles the traditional Islamic claim that the Quran is identical to the one revealed to Muhammad, showing instead a text shaped by editors, caliphs, and scribes working long after the prophet's death. The implications are seismic. If the Quran has a history, then its authority must be re-examined. Dr. Smith ends with a challenge to scholars and believers alike, to follow the evidence wherever it leads, and to pursue truth over tradition. In doing so, he invites every listener to question not only what they believe about the Quran, but why they believe it. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and share this video so others can see it.
Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more Islamic history content. Stay with us as we sift through history to find out what the standard Islamic narrative on the Islamic Awareness website is hiding regarding the origin of Islam. Jesus is Lord.